Chapter 3 of Tales of Troy, Ulysses, the Sacker of Cities. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott Bennett. Tales of Troy, Ulysses, the Sacker of Cities by Andrew Lang. The Wooing of Helen of the Fair Hands. This was the way in which people lived when Ulysses was young and wished to be married. The worst thing in the way of life was that the greatest and most beautiful princesses might be taken prisoners and carried off as slaves to the towns of the men who had killed their fathers and husbands. Now, at that time one lady was far the fairest in the world, namely, Helen, daughter of King Tyndareus. Every young prince heard of her and desired to marry her. So her father invited them all to his palace and entertained them, and found out what they would give. Among the rest Ulysses went, but his father had a little kingdom, a rough island, with others near it, and Ulysses had not a good chance. He was not tall. Though very strong and active, he was a short man with broad shoulders, but his face was handsome, and, like all the princes, he wore long yellow hair, clustering like a hyacinth flower. His manner was rather hesitating, and he seemed to speak very slowly at first, though afterwards his words came freely. He was good at everything a man can do. He could plow, and build houses, and make ships, and he was the best archer in Greece except one, and could bend the great bow of a dead king, Eurytus, which no other man could string. But he had no horses, and had no great train of followers, and, in short, neither Helen nor her father thought of choosing Ulysses for her husband out of so many tall, handsome young princes, glittering with gold ornaments. Still, Helen was very kind to Ulysses, and there was great friendship between them, which was fortunate for her in the end. Tyndareus first made all the princes take an oath that they would stand by the prince whom he chose, and would fight for him in all his quarrels. Then he named for her husband Menelaus, king of Lacedaemon. He was a very brave man, but not one of the strongest. He was not such a fighter as the gigantic Aias, the tallest and strongest of men, or as Diomede, the friend of Ulysses, or as his own brother Agamemnon, the king of the rich city of Mycenae, who was chief over all other princes, and general of the whole army in war. The great lions carved in stone that seemed to guard his city are still standing above the gate through which Agamemnon used to drive his chariot. The man who proved to be the best fighter of all, Achilles, was not among the lovers of Helen, for he was still a boy, and his mother Thetis of the silver feet, a goddess of the sea, had sent him to be brought up as a girl among the daughters of Lycomedes of Cyrus, in an island far away. Thetis did this because Achilles was her only child, and there was a prophecy that if he went to the wars, he would win the greatest glory, but die very young, and never see his mother again. She thought that if war broke out, he would not be found hiding in girl's dress among girls far away. So at last, after thinking over the matter for long, Tyndareus gave fair Helen to Menelaus, the rich king of Lacedaemon, and her twin sister Clytemnestra, who was also very beautiful, was given to King Agamemnon, the chief over all the princes. They all lived very happily together at first, but not for long. In the meantime, King Tyndareus spoke to his brother Icarius, who had a daughter named Penelope. She also was very pretty, but not nearly so beautiful as her cousin, fair Helen, and we know that Penelope was not very fond of her cousin. Icarius, admiring the strength and wisdom of Ulysses, gave him his daughter Penelope to be his wife, and Ulysses loved her very dearly. No man and wife were ever dearer to each other. They went away together to rocky Ithaca, and perhaps Penelope was not sorry that a wide sea lay between her home and that of Helen. For Helen was not only the fairest woman that ever lived in the world, but she was so kind and gracious and charming that no man could see her without loving her. When she was only a child, the famous Prince Theseus, who was famous in Greek story, carried her away to his own city of Athens, meaning to marry her when she grew up. And even at that time there was a war for her sake, for her brothers followed Theseus with an army and fought him and brought her home. She had fairy gifts. For instance, she had a great red jewel called the star, and when she wore it, red drops seemed to fall from it and vanish before they touched and stained her white breast, so white that people called her the daughter of the swan. She could speak in the very voice of any man or woman, so folk also named her Echo, and it was believed that she could neither grow old nor die, but would at last pass away to the Elysian plain and the world's end, where life is easiest for men. No snow comes thither, nor great storm, nor any rain, but always the river of ocean that rings round the whole earth sends forth the west wind to blow cool on the people of King Rhadamanthus of the fair hair. These were some of the stories that men told of fair Helen, but Ulysses was never sorry that he had not the fortune to marry her, so fond he was of her cousin, his wife Penelope, who was very wise and good. When Ulysses brought his wife home, they lived, as the custom was, in the palace of his father, King Laertes. But Ulysses with his own hands built a chamber for Penelope and himself. There grew a great olive tree in the inner court of the palace, and its stem was as large as one of the tall carved pillars of the hall. Round about this tree Ulysses built the chamber, and finished it with close-set stones, and roofed it over, and made close-fastening doors. Then he cut off all the branches of the olive tree, and smoothed the trunk, and shaped it into the bedpost, and made the bedstead beautiful with inlaid work of gold and silver and ivory. There was no such bed in Greece, and no man could move it from its place, and this bed comes again into the story at the very end. Now time went by, and Ulysses and Penelope had one son called Telemachus, and Eurycleia, who had been his father's nurse, took care of him. They were all very happy, and lived in peace in rocky Ithaca, and Ulysses looked after his lands and flocks and herds, and went hunting with his dog Argos, the swiftest of hounds. End of section 3.